Death offers liberation through recognizing pure consciousness. The moment every living being fears death might actually be your greatest opportunity. Tibetan teachings claim there are 3 stages where your consciousness encounters light, visions of deities, and the forces that shape your rebirth. Each stage holds a secret, but miss the signs, and you may start the cycle all over again. What would you choose? What if death isn't the end, but a doorway? And what if stepping through that doorway offers the greatest opportunity of all? Freedom itself. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo, this possibility begins in the very first moment after life ends. This is the Chikai Bardo, the stage where the clear light appears. But before we go on, let's pause and imagine something. Picture this: a brilliant, unearthly radiance fills your awareness. It's not like sunlight or the glow of a flame. It's pure, endless, and completely overwhelming, yet strangely familiar, like you've seen it before in a deeply buried memory. Tibetan teachings describe this light as the essence of consciousness itself, the ultimate reality without beginning or end. In its presence, there's no judgment, no separation, and no fear. It is perfect, pristine awareness, the true nature of your mind. And in this moment, if you're able to recognize it, something miraculous can happen. Liberation. Liberation in this context isn't about going somewhere else or escaping. It's the realization that you already are this light, that your deepest self has always been inseparably part of this pure awareness. The Tibetan texts describe this recognition as instant and total freedom, a breaking away from all illusions of separation, identity, and limitation. But as beautiful as this sounds, it's also incredibly rare. Why? Because most minds aren't prepared for it. The Chikai Bardo is described as fleeting, and many miss this profound moment entirely. The same text explains why. The habits of fear, attachment, and clinging to identity run so deep that the light is often perceived not as liberation, but as something terrifying. When faced with its brilliance, people sometimes recoil. They resist its unfamiliar intensity, preferring the comfort of what they've known, even if that means falling back into confusion. It's said this is why so many are unable to achieve awakening during this stage. And here's where we see parallels in modern accounts of near-death experiences. Many people who've come close to death describe encountering a bright, peaceful light that feels deeply loving and serene. Some even say it seemed to welcome them, as if it were guiding them home. Scientists and psychologists have debated whether this is a biological phenomenon tied to a dying brain. But what if it's more than that? The Tibetan perspective suggests these glimpses of a light-filled presence may, in fact, offer a brief look into the Chikai Bardo. One story from the Bardo Todol itself speaks directly to this challenge of recognition. It describes how some souls, upon seeing the clear light, mistake it for something outside themselves, an overpowering force they can't comprehend. Imagine someone walking into a bright room after years of living in the dark. Their eyes struggle to adjust, and rather than allowing themselves to see clearly, they may panic and retreat to the shadows instead. The teachings remind us, the light isn't outside of you. It is you, the very essence of your being. Learning to recognize this before you die could make all the difference. But why don't we naturally see this light for what it is? It comes down to how deeply we identify with the illusions of everyday life. We are trained to think of ourselves as separate individuals, defined by our bodies, our roles, our achievements, and even our failures. All of these attachments create layers of confusion about our true nature. At the moment of death, when the boundaries of life and self start to dissolve, these attachments can act like weights, holding us back from recognizing the clear light and merging with it. To get a sense of this attachment in action, think about how we cling to our sense of identity in life. Imagine losing your job. or changing a major aspect of your role in the world. Often, people experience this as a mini-crisis, a feeling of being adrift or unsure of who they are. Now, magnify that struggle tenfold, and you start to understand why encountering the clear light can feel so overwhelming. The process asks you to let go of everything, not just your job or your relationships, but your very sense of self. Yet, even with all these challenges, there is hope. Tibetan teachings emphasize that the capacity to recognize the clear light isn't something you have to gain from the outside. It's already within you. It's part of your mind's natural state, often hidden beneath layers of distraction and conditioning. Practices like meditation, mindfulness, and compassion are considered essential tools for peeling back those layers, making it easier to recognize the light when the time comes. Think of it as training yourself to face the unfamiliar with clarity instead of fear. So, death isn't just an ending, it's a moment of unimaginable potential. The Chikai Bardo reminds us that liberation is always possible, even in what seems like the final moment. Recognizing this truth transforms the way we think about dying, but it also challenges us to reconsider how we live. If letting go of attachments is key to recognizing the light, then maybe the real work begins here and now. But this moment of the clear light is just the first step. If it's missed or misunderstood, then what comes after? The Tibetan Book of the Dead reveals that what follows might be even stranger. Vivid, larger-than-life visions that seem to come from somewhere outside of us. But appearances can deceive. What if those visions are really mirrors of our own mind? What if, after death, every vision you encountered wasn't something external? No gods, no demons, but reflections of your own mind. Thoughtful. This is the teaching of the Bardo, the second stage of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Here, the soul encounters vivid and dramatic imagery, figures so powerful they might feel like they come from some higher realm. But ancient wisdom insists otherwise. These visions, whether serene, terrifying, or overwhelming, are born directly from within you. This stage isn't about discovering external truths, but about seeing yourself completely, your mind laid bare. This stage begins with the peaceful deities. These are luminous, compassionate figures radiating wisdom and serenity. They represent the mind's highest potential, the enlightened qualities already present within you, waiting to be realized. For example, figures like the Buddha of infinite light embody clarity, compassion, or deep inner peace. These visions don't approach you as strangers, they're mirrors of what's already inside, though most fail to recognize this. Just as the clear light of the earlier stage reveals your ultimate nature, these deities reflect your most enlightened self. The challenge is not just seeing them, but realizing they are not separate beings. Their brilliance is yours, their wisdom is yours. To see them as external is to miss the point. But peaceful deities are only part of this stage. Their opposites, known as the wrathful deities, soon follow. These figures, often depicted in Tibetan art, with fearsome expressions, sharp teeth, or fiery surroundings, aren't enemies or even evil. Instead, they're the darker corners of your own consciousness come to life. Suppressed emotions, unhealed wounds, unresolved fears, all of these emerge in forms that can feel threatening or overwhelming. For many, this confrontation is incredibly difficult. But the role of the wrathful deities isn't punishment. They're forcing you to address the parts of yourself you've long ignored or denied. Imagine for a moment the way dreams sometimes work. Have you ever woken up after a nightmare where someone or something was chasing you? It feels external, but in reflection, you realize that dream was a projection of your stress, anger, or hidden fears. The wrathful deities operate much the same way. They personify the parts of your inner world you've avoided during life, demanding attention now that everything has been stripped bare. To approach them with fear or resistance is to miss their purpose, but to recognize their origins, your unresolved emotions, can lead to transformation. The Bardo encourages us to think of the mind as a mirror. If the surface of the mirror is cluttered with dirt and smudges, what reflects back is distortion, chaos, darkness, perhaps even terror. But if the mirror is kept clear, if you've worked in life to understand and heal yourself, then what comes forth is beauty, order, and peace. The teachings suggest that what appears in this stage relies heavily on the life you've lived and the state of your mind at the moment of death. You don't suddenly become different after dying. Instead, death reveals exactly what's within you. Here, the peaceful and wrathful deities are less important as separate beings than as signs of our relationship with ourselves. Carl Jung once wrote, "Gods and demons are projections of the unconscious, powerful and inescapable until understood as parts of ourselves." His words echo what the Tibetan Book of the Dead has taught for centuries. What you see in the Bardo is deeply personal. The peaceful deities present the best version of yourself. The wrathful bring out the unhealed, monstrous parts of your psyche. If you can approach both as parts of you rather than as something to fear or worship, you gain the chance to integrate both sides. This integration is what the texts refer to as transformation.
But there's a complication.
Fear. Imagine standing in front of a wrathful deity, its expression fierce and overwhelming, its energy something you simply want to avoid. This is often the reaction the untrained mind has. Wrathful deities, as faces of your unresolved fears and attachments, can be so overpowering that people reject them instinctively, missing the lesson altogether. Instead of understanding their projection, they flee into panic. This fear ripples outward, pulling the consciousness deeper into suffering and further away from liberation. Without training or preparation, the mind can find itself trapped in its projections, not because these visions are genuinely threatening, but because they are misunderstood. But how do you prepare for something so intense? The Tibetan Book of the Dead emphasizes practices of mindfulness and self-awareness in life as the foundation for facing the Bardo. Meditation teaches individuals to observe their emotions without judgment, to confront fear without turning away from it, and to cultivate an understanding that both joy and suffering rise and fall within the mind. By practicing compassion, self-awareness, and even forgiveness long before death, you begin clearing the mirror of your mind. This preparation means that when these figures manifest, you have the clarity to see them for what they are, neither gods nor demons, but reflections. This stage is not judgment or punishment, it's an unveiling, a chance to understand yourself on the deepest level. In life, we spend so much time avoiding pain or chasing only pleasure. The Bardo forces those habits to pause, confronting you with everything: peaceful beauty, terrifying chaos, and all the nuances in between. Still, it's not hopeless. The point of this stage is awareness. To see and embrace these figures as mirrors of your own mind frees you from judgment. And that awareness opens the door to transformation. But what happens next? If the projections you encounter here are truly reflections of your inner world, what does that mean for the next stage? How do the visions in this Bardo set the stage for what comes after? In the Tibetan teachings, the answer lies in how these manifestations lead consciousness toward rebirth. What draw shapes the patterns of your next life? What if every thought, every emotion you've ever had is quietly building the foundation of your future, even after death? This is the teaching of the Bardo, the final stage described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Here, consciousness begins its transition toward rebirth, and this journey is shaped by powerful forces, karma, desire, and the unresolved patterns of the mind. Unlike the earlier stages of death, where liberation is possible with recognition and awareness, the Siddha Bardo is characterized by movement, an irresistible pull toward rebirth. But this pull is not random. It is guided entirely by the energy you carry. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness in this stage is like a seed. This seed carries within it every experience, thought, and intention from your life. And just like a seed in nature, it attracts the right environment for growth. Your unresolved emotions are like magnetic forces, drawing you toward conditions that match their weight and intensity. For example, strong feelings of attachment could draw you toward a life filled with similar desires and dependencies, while compassion and mindfulness might guide you to a realm aligned with wisdom and peace. Tibetan teachings emphasize that what unfolds here is not punishment or reward. It is resonance. The energy of your mind determines the conditions of your rebirth, creating a blueprint for the next life. The visions you encounter during this stage feel anything but abstract. They appear as vivid doorways into different realms of existence. Tibetan texts describe these realms in detail, ranging from higher, enlightened realms to lower, more troubled states of being. Each doorway resonates with the energy of your mind. If your consciousness is gripped by fear, anger, or longing, the visions could lead you to challenging rebirths. On the other hand, clarity, kindness, and intention can open pathways to realms where spiritual growth is more accessible. Yet, these realms are not fixed places like physical locations. They are symbolic, with each realm representing a state of consciousness that mirrors your inner world. At first glance, these teachings may seem far removed from modern thought, but they align more closely with contemporary ideas than you might expect. In psychology, for instance, unresolved emotions are known to influence future behavior. Negative thought patterns create cycles of reaction and habit, shaping how we respond to life. Similarly, the idea of karma in the Siddha Bardo isn't about cosmic reward. It's a continuation of patterns already established. The Tibetan Book of the Dead sees karma as the accumulated energy of every action, thought, and intention. When death removes the distractions of physical existence, what remains is the pure current of this energy. It acts as a gravitational force, guiding you towards circumstances that echo your mental and emotional state. To better understand this, think about how habits already shape life. If someone lives with constant anger, for instance, their relationships reflect tension and conflict. These tendencies, left unchecked, carve pathways in the mind. This is similar to how scientists describe neural pathways. Neurons that fire together begin to wire together, solidifying patterns of thought and behavior. The Siddha Bardo teaches that this doesn't stop with death. In fact, it becomes even more significant. With no physical distractions, the mind's raw tendencies take the lead, pulling you into experiences that match those patterns. What makes this stage so critical is the way it reveals the consequences of living unconsciously. The Tibetan texts don't frame this as fate, though. There is still some degree of choice possible, even in the Siddha Bardo. By maintaining clarity and calm awareness, it's possible to influence the outcome. Recognizing the visions as projections of your own mind can help you transcend their pull, breaking free from the karmic forces that would otherwise guide you mindlessly toward rebirth. This is where mindfulness and intention, practiced throughout life, prove most valuable.
To understand this better, let's explore an analogy.
Imagine a suitcase packed for a journey. If you pack carefully, preparing for where you want to go, you'll carry the right things. But if you throw in clutter, disorganization, and chaos, your journey reflects that. The Tibetan Bardo teaches that life is the packing stage. Your mental habits, intentions, and actions act as the items filling your suitcase. In death, once the journey begins, there's no chance to reorganize. You carry with you only what you packed. Even science echoes this idea in unexpected ways. Studies in positive psychology highlight how cultivating gratitude, mindfulness, and purpose can improve resilience and life satisfaction. The Tibetan Book of the Dead pushes this concept further, suggesting these practices influence not only this life, but also the transition through death and beyond. By strengthening clear and compassionate states of mind, you prepare for a smoother, more intentional passage through the Tibetan Bardo. The challenge, however, lies in the momentum of past habits. Emotions like fear or longing can become overwhelming. Without mindfulness, the consciousness may feel swept along, replaying the same cycles endlessly through rebirth after rebirth. To prevent this, Tibetan teachings emphasize the importance of cultivating awareness now, before death. Meditation, self-reflection, and conscious living are seen as preparatory tools to loosen the grip of attachment and lessen the pull of habitual energy. But this raises a deeper question. If life shapes this journey after death, how can we reshape life itself? If the Tibetan Bardo shows us that rebirth is not random, but the continuation of patterns, then perhaps the most powerful choice we can make begins here and now. Changing the way we think, act, and respond today can transform not only the life we lead, but the future that awaits us. The Tibetan Bardo reminds us that rebirth isn't something imposed on us, it's a process we create, moment by moment. But what would happen if we didn't wait until death to confront these patterns? Could ancient teachings like these, paired with modern mindfulness practices, help us break free from cycles before they even begin? What if the best way to live fully is to prepare for death? It may sound counterintuitive, even uncomfortable, but some of the most profound teachings in Tibetan Buddhism suggest exactly this. The Tibetan Book of the Dead captures this wisdom. When we make peace with the inevitability of death, we gain clarity, strength, and an entirely new way of experiencing life. Instead of waiting for the final moment to force us to let go, these teachings invite us to practice letting go now. Through meditation, mindfulness, and compassion, we train the mind not only to face death with awareness, but to live with greater purpose. It's no secret that our fear of death runs deep. For many, it's a topic to avoid, something that's pushed aside until it feels absolutely necessary to confront. But this fear can limit us more than we realize. Tibetan tradition teaches that ignoring death traps us, not only in emotional avoidance, but also in a life shaped by unexamined habits and distractions. By bringing death into view, not as an enemy but as a natural part of existence, something remarkable happens. The same awareness that can prepare us for death can also help us live more fully in the present. Tibetan masters remind us that every moment of life is an opportunity for awakening. But that can only happen if we're willing to look past our fear. So how do we begin this process? Tibetan Buddhism provides specific practices designed to prepare the mind for the stages of death. Two of the most well-known are Tonglen, the meditation on compassion, and the chanting of mantras. Tonglen is often described as the practice of taking and giving. In this meditation, you imagine breathing in the suffering of others with each inhale and sending out love and healing with each exhale. Initially, this may seem overwhelming. Why would anyone voluntarily invite suffering even as an idea? But the purpose is to dissolve self-centeredness. By embracing the suffering of others with compassion, fear begins to weaken. The mind opens and softens, shedding the walls we build out of self-interest. In the Tibetan view, this practice allows us to expand outward, aligning our mind with the qualities of the peaceful deities we've discussed earlier.
Mantras, on the other hand, use sound to focus the mind.
These aren't random words, but vibrations believed to shift consciousness itself. Reciting mantras such as Om Mani Padme Hum creates a kind of rhythm, aligning the mind with higher states of awareness. Tibetan masters sometimes describe this practice as planting seeds. Each repetition of a mantra strengthens mental clarity and calm, preparing a person to face not just death, but the challenges of everyday life with greater resilience. To put it simply, these practices act like a rehearsal. Tibetan Buddhism views life as preparation for death, with every moment offering the chance to practice awareness and presence. Imagine a stage actor running lines over and over, preparing for a performance they know will one day come. The idea is similar here. Each moment we cultivate mindfulness or compassion is a rehearsal for the ultimate moment of release. By the time death begins to unfold, the mind ideally has done the work necessary to remain steady and clear across the bardos. Scientific studies on meditation and mindfulness are beginning to affirm what these ancient traditions have taught for centuries. Modern neuroscience shows that practicing mindfulness strengthens the brain's ability to regulate emotions, increases focus, and enhances overall emotional resilience. It even reveals changes in brain structure, such as the growth of grey matter in areas associated with compassion and awareness. What Tibetan teachings add to this is a view of these benefits that extends beyond life. These practices, while incredibly transformative here and now, are also seen as tools for navigating death. Meditation offers a kind of mental conditioning, enabling the mind to stay calm and aware when confronted by the unknown. Living with an awareness of impermanence is particularly powerful. It's not just about knowing that life is short, it's about feeling it deeply. When someone meditates on impermanence, each moment takes on new meaning. Decisions feel more significant, distractions feel less important, and gratitude naturally arises. Tibetan teachings suggest that this awareness creates a kind of momentum. Those who live consciously, with an open heart and a quiet mind, won't only live better, they'll die better too. At the time of death, this sense of presence can make the difference between panic and peace, between blind reactions and a calm recognition of the clear light. And yet, these practices aren't just theoretical, they are deeply practical, even life-changing. Take, for instance, the way Tonglen has been taught in schools, hospitals, and even therapy settings. Breathing in the suffering of someone else, a loved one, a patient, or even a stranger, can bring immediate feelings of empathy and connection. Similarly, simply being present with this moment's impermanence doesn't require advanced training. It can start right now, with something as simple as paying attention to your breath or letting go of a small attachment. Little by little, these moments of practice build, and when death comes, they become a kind of map to navigate the unknown. So, preparing for death isn't morbid at all. It's a way to reconnect with what matters in life, and paradoxically to find peace. Tibetan wisdom reminds us that how we live shapes how we die. And if death is a journey, then wouldn't you want to pack well for it, starting today? But what happens in that final moment, when everything we've practiced is put to the test? Could guidance from others make the ultimate difference? What if, at the very moment of death, someone could guide you through the unknown? A voice that offers clarity when everything else feels disorienting. In Tibetan Buddhist traditions, that is exactly the role of the guide, a spiritual anchor during the transition through the bardos. This figure, often a lama or an experienced practitioner, reads aloud from the Bardo Todol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, to help the soul navigate the stages of death. And make no mistake, This guidance isn't just for comfort. It's meant to fundamentally alter the experience, providing the soul with the tools to recognize illusions, embrace awareness, and, if possible, achieve liberation. Navigating the Bardos alone is said to be an overwhelming process, to put it lightly. The experiences described in the Tibetan texts, blinding lights, peaceful deities, terrifying forms, and the pull of karmic energy, can easily confuse a mind that is unprepared. At the moment of death, attachments, fears, and even misconceptions about identity can dominate, clouding a person's ability to recognize what's really happening. Without a guide, the soul is left to its own tendencies, which often lead it deeper into confusion. The role of the guide is to counter this drift. They serve as a steadying force, reading instructions to the soul and emphasizing the core teachings the individual may have cultivated in life. Their words act as signposts, reminding the dying person of the opportunities for liberation hidden within these seemingly chaotic moments. The teachings describe the guide as a kind of lighthouse, cutting through the storm of fear and attachment that can arise after death. Imagine standing in total darkness with flashes of vivid, unfamiliar light all around you. Without direction, you could easily lose your footing, disoriented by what you see. But then there's the sound of a voice, calm and reassuring, pointing you toward exactly what you need to focus on. This is the role of the guide in the Tibetan tradition. They continually bring attention back to the clear light, the pure awareness that first appeared in the Chikai Bardo. The guide reminds the soul to see this light not as something external, but as their true nature. Ultimately, the goal is not just to find peace, but to recognize the wisdom and clarity the soul already carries. Thoughtfully, think of the Bardo Todol as a spiritual roadmap. The guide uses the text to address the challenges unique to each stage. For instance, when the peaceful and wrathful deities of the Chonyid Bardo appear, the guide reads passages designed to help the individual recognize these visions as projections of their own mind. By doing this, the guide helps the soul avoid taking these experiences too literally. The peaceful deities aren't to be clung to, the wrathful ones aren't to be feared. These figures simply reveal the true nature of consciousness. The guide carefully points these things out, offering clarity where it might otherwise be easy to become overwhelmed or misdirected. This tradition views death not as a tragedy, but as a sacred process, a natural but profound transition. Far from being dismissed or ignored, the moment of death is treated as an opportunity for liberation. Having a guide present reflects this view, emphasizing that death deserves just as much awareness and preparation as life itself. And what makes this process even more significant is that it's not simply about one person achieving peace. It's considered an expression of compassion. The guide devotes their energy to being present for the soul at its most vulnerable time, offering stability in a moment when everything else feels unknowable. In Tibetan culture, this role is seen as one of the highest acts of care and support. Interestingly, elements of this perspective have found their way into modern end-of-life practices, even outside of Tibetan Buddhist contexts. Hospice care, for example, embraces the idea that death is not merely a medical event, but a deeply emotional and spiritual experience. Hospice workers, family members, and chaplains often serve as modern-day guides, helping individuals and their loved ones make sense of the dying process. While not rooted in the same spiritual framework as the Bardo Thodol, these practices echo its core principle that death, when approached with preparation and support, can be meaningful, even transformative. Therapists working in grief counseling or end-of-life care often describe their role in similar terms. Just as the Tibetan guide helps the soul navigate the Bardos, these professionals help individuals navigate the emotional terrain of dying or loss. By fostering an environment of acceptance, they aim to reduce fear and create space for reflection. For some, This shift in perspective changes everything, allowing death to feel less like an unknown void and more like a meaningful passage. This modern extension of the guide's role serves as a reminder that the core principles of the Bardo, awareness, compassion, and preparation, are timeless, but the importance of the Tibetan guide cannot be overstated. They don't just help you through unfamiliar territory. They remind you of the wisdom you already possess. The guide doesn't present answers you haven't heard before. Instead, they reinforce teachings you've likely practiced, teachings designed to prepare you for this moment. Their role is not to take you by the hand and make decisions for you, but to hold up a mirror, helping you see your own clarity, even amidst the chaos of death. In many ways, the guide embodies everything we've explored so far. A reminder of the clear light from the first Bardo, a voice of calm during the intense projections of the second, and a grounding presence as the soul faces the forces of karma in the Sidpa Bardo. Without a guide, the journey can feel isolating and overwhelming. With one, death becomes less of a mystery and more of an opportunity, a sacred moment made vibrant with purpose and direction. But as we consider these ancient teachings, there's an even bigger question. How can they serve us here and now, in a modern world dominated by science and rationality? Death is not the end. It's a mirror reflecting the life you've lived and the consciousness you've cultivated. The Tibetan Book of the Dead reminds us that everything, our thoughts, actions, and attachments, shapes what comes next. But these teachings aren't just about dying, they're about living with clarity and intention. As Trungpa Rinpoche said, this is another way of looking at the psychological picture of ourselves through practical awareness. So, what would change if you saw every moment as preparation for the greatest journey of all? The answer lies in how you choose to live, starting now. What would you do differently?